Welcome back to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. Of course, if you're new here, you don't know me, but if you've been around a while, you know that my name is Jill. I'm your host. I'm a time management strategist. I'm an author, an award-winning speaker, and an advocate for all things growth in motherhood. And if you are listening to this episode today, just a quick reminder that you can also tune in on YouTube and catch this conversation that I'm having with Heidi live in action in video. And so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you today to Heidi Esther. She is a joyologist, which, of course, is someone that I had to have on the podcast, a joyologist. She describes herself as like if Mr. Rogers and Captain Marvel had a baby who loved baking chocolate chip cookies, this would be her. And so I think a question that we're maybe thinking as we start to listen to this introduction is, what the hell's a joyologist, right? So it's someone who empowers hardworking, generous helpers to liberate their joy. And so the nuts and bolts of this is learning to be the confident, authentic leader that you were born to be. And so Heidi is this person who helps us do this. She's a certified emotional intelligence life coach. She's a speaker as well and a best-selling author. And she leverages her expertise in relationship building, in storytelling, and mindfulness and personal transformation to help us create the life of joy that we deserve. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. It's a
It's
pleasure to be here. It's a joy to be
it's a
here.
joy. It is. I'm so happy. We got connected through a networking piece earlier in the summer and we've stayed connected. And I'm so honored to have you here on the show. And especially with the conversation that we're going to be having today, which is kind of right up my alley about time and what's robbing our time and how we can get it back and all that. But
hmm
before we dive into that, I would love for you to just share your story, anything that really feels important to kind of cue us up for this conversation today.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that invitation. It is a honor and delight to be here. Um, my story, in a nutshell, I once was a woman who sat, well, like one time, it was about 15 years ago. I was in the back of a Meyer grocery store. I was sitting on the floor. I had one baby in my arms who was very slow drinking, very newbornish. And then I had a toddler off to one side, shoveling handfuls of Cheerios in his mouth, all going all over the floor, right? Because that's, what toddlers do. And we're just, having this all, we almost had a meltdown. We're, kind of hanging out in the back there, staring at this wall of fish tanks. And I'm just watching these fish go round and around. And then I close my eyes. I can like hear the ice cream dripping from the bottom of my shopping cart. And then I had this thought. I was like, is this it? Is this what my life is? And it wasn't the first time I'd had that thought. And it kind of started me on this journey of like, what, like, who am I? Like, am I happy? And I shortly after realized like I wasn't even safe. Like my kids and I weren't safe. And so I went on a big journey over a good, generous decade of like kind of a divorce and a midlife awakening and depression and unemployment. And I call it my decade in life's fun house, where I learned, I kept coming back to like that question, like, am I happy? Is this it? Like, who am I? And I kind of I say I stumbled through that, and I got to the end of this tunnel, and I really was surprised because I'm always like the helper. Like that's how I was like, I'm a connector, I'm a helper. I'm the glue. I'm the person that will like show up with all the stuff last minute. Like, all right, you can't make it. I got you. No problem. And and that always felt so, so good to me. And I got to the end of this journey, and it was like the heart of the pandemic shutdown. And I'd recently been unemployed. I had recently had a relative pass, right? So I was like grieving. And then like my teenagers were all whiny and stinky, like hiding in their bedrooms on virtual school. And I was able to like live my best life every day. Like in addition, right? Along with the grief, along with the like, is our world going to melt down? Like I was able to find joy. And I was like, I feel like I'm living a miracle,
Mm.
like a freaking miracle here. And I'm making soup. I'm having like trying out sourdough, having my best life.
Yeah.
And I got this call to like start sharing my story. And I had been sharing my story like with a local little group for several years. I'd been like, and so during that decade I'd accrued mindfulness and emotional intelligence, relationship building. I've been to therapy like 3 4 times, right? So I'd opened up to going from the isolated mom who took care of everyone else to the person who could be a friend, but also have people help her. And so I started sharing my story, started opening up to help. And my blog, I started a blog, Terrifying, turned into a book, Terrifying. Right. I heard, I was listening to your show with Amber Renee talk about imposter syndrome, right? So all this stuff, all this imposter system, very, very common. And I got some calls to like start speaking and um start like helping and mentoring women one on one. And so then I started coaching. And so it's kind of been like this very organic, blindfolded, kind of trust filled, but very imposter filled journey to finding just this grounded joy every day, no matter what.
That is
And
so
so,
powerful.
mm,
This like visual that you took us on, I could see you in the back of the grocery store. I can see you doing all of this work and making your bread and doing the soup. Like it just took me on such this journey, and I understood so clearly what this has been like for you
yeah.
over the past decade plus of really sort of I was trying to write down the words that I was experiencing as you were telling this, like rediscovery, but it's not a rediscovery, like it's a rebirth or like an awakening, like you said, or like these types of things. And in midlife, we often find that women like us who just went along and did the things we were supposed to and got married and had
Hmm.
kids and bought the house. And then we realized, like, wait just a minute here. This is maybe not what I thought, or this is what I thought, but it doesn't feel like I thought.
Yeah,
There
it's that
more?
it's that, like it's that moment of just, like, feeling like I'm a little bit empty, like, there's more here, like, I'm at, like, some kind of a threshold, and I want the other side of the door, I don't even know how to get to that, like, w there's something else there, like and a lot of times we're taught to just, like, look externally, right? So we can spend our lives looking externally for what those things are, and it takes, like it kinda sometimes it can take, like it took me realizing that, like, my kids and I weren't safe. It took me realizing that to move me into action. And emotional intelligence that we talk a lot about. I think the sleeper piece of intra and extra personal skills is motivation, self-motivation. And a lot of times we need to call what we call in the industry the pleasure pain threshold. So it has to be more painful than pleasurable to make that movement. And so we wait until like some part of our life is like melting down or on fire to take that step, but we don't have to. We can listen to that whisper and say like I'm going to I'm going to figure that like I'm going to figure that out somehow. Be I'm going to open myself to listening to like what if this isn't it, what could be it? Like, what could I do next? And it doesn't have to be like the end piece. We never get to see like the end piece. We just get to see the next piece.
Right. I love that.
And yeah.
I love that you said that about the pain pleasure threshold, because I'm just thinking about the women that I work with, and it's probably the same with you, is that they don't come to me until they have had a crisis. Like
Hmm.
they will suffer and plug away and push it down and get on with life until something big enough happens, or until they have a big enough realization about how it impacts other people, like their
Mm,
kids, then they give themselves permission,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Or when
because the word right, because we're not taught of our worth.
Mhm,
We're taught to see and reflect the worth of everyone else around us. And
mhm.
so when that's threatened, we're like, oh, we show up. we show up big, but like
Totally.
maybe it's time to show up big for us.
I think it's time.
Right?
It feels
Right?
like time. Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
speaking of
Eh,
time, this is a
oh,
perfect transition
time.
in because I talk a lot about time. I teach a lot of time management, and I'm so curious to always keep learning about different ways and different perspectives and um different nuggets of the puzzle, different pieces of the puzzle that contribute to our time feeling like it's just slipping away from us. And is this because
Mm,
like we're low on our priority list? Like, what's your perspective on this? I'd love to hear.
yeah. So I think it's all interwoven. Um, so what to get to that piece, right, where we can show up big for ourselves, we have to be able to equate our worthiness to other people's worthiness. But how does this really show up? Because everyone can say, like, well, I'm worthy, I'm fine. And so here's how this show up. So I call these time robbers. And I can honestly say that I have spent decades of my life like just giving my time away to these robbers. And these are so what are these? Kind of like ways that we're taught to like societally that are societally accepted. So that's the challenge, right? So other people are going to give us positive validation for these time robbers. So it's like they're just padding them with accolades. So like perfectionism, right? So when my kids were really little, I used to iron their baby clothes.
Oh my goodness
Okay.
gracious.
Yeah. So what? Kids go through an outfit every like 15 minutes when
Uh-huh.
they're little. Okay. And so if you think about like a whole wardrobe of clothes always having to be ironed and pressed and ready to go. Like even if we were like weren't even leaving the house. So imagine how much time I spent giving into that perfectionism time robber when I could have been taking a nap. I could have been fixing myself something other than like the granola bar or like the bag of chips in the cabinet. Um, and so we get, and then right when we would go out and the kids would be well dressed, I would get lots of compliments. And like my parents would come and be like, "We have the best grandkids." So, right? So we get these and so that's the hard piece is like so like obviously perfectionism is one thing, but we don't call it that. We're just like doing the right thing. We want our kids to look the best and feel the best, right? So there's always all these different shades of it. It's never just like these are negative things. Like when we're in survival mode and we're like just bowling through it. We're like, yeah, do it, right? Because society's like, yeah, you got this, you're strong. But what if we redefine strong?
Mm.
What if we redefine strong as someone who could, you know, take care of themselves? Who the strong was like being strong in all the ways for ourselves. So we could be physically strong, mentally strong, emotionally strong, as opposed to just like just being in survival mode. And society, you know, applauds us for like just doing all the things. There's I went to an event last year in my town that gives away a big woman, it's like this big woman of the year kind of an award. And the women who have historically received this award, they're just completely self-sacrificing. And I just I almost got up out of my seat and, like, left the room because I can no longer support women who are just sacrificing themselves. They look like they haven't slept in days. They look like somebody else picked their clothes out for them because they probably did because 'cause they're so exhausted from doing all the things for everybody. And so these time robbers are so hard to see because they're so tied into like part of who we are and like part of how we get fed from other people. And so being able to kind of like pull that apart and be able to feed ourselves and take care of ourselves and say we're worthy of taking this time is when we can start to say like, "Oh, I don't need to live in survival mode. I don't need to always iron my kids' clothes or like wipe the baseboards clean every time that I mop the floor. I don't need to." And so these show up in um like I will say in like in my entrepreneur journey, even outside of my decade in life's funhouse, like second guessing myself. Like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And you just kind of sitting in this mode, and people would say like, "Oh, it's fine to just take all the time that you need. just take all the time, right? So we just sit and people are like, all right. And so, so all these different ways in which our societally like encourages us in these modes where we're just spinning out and draining ourselves. Like, um, there's like procrastination, exhaustion when we, second guess ourselves, when we go crazy busy, when alls we do is do as opposed to be. Like, I thought it was so beautiful that before this conversation, you said, I'm going to go be for a couple minutes. And I was like, oh, so good, right? Because then we know that, and we all have these different centers of intelligence, right? We got the big old brain we taught in school, so reinforced. And then we got the heart. The heart speaks much more quietly. So we got to take that stillness and that time to be and to listen. And then we have the body. Like, you have a strong body intelligence connection when you're like doing something in the shower, working out, and you're like, oh, I got the idea. Ah, right. And so taking that time to like listen, like, oh, if this is not it, how can I know? And so integrating those pieces and yeah, so it all really starts with like not, and people always say like, all right, how do I get to joy? How do I do joy? Well, should I just find what's joyful for me? And there's this piece. There's always something big in like before it. And for me, I help busy, generous women figure out what time robber is really robbing that time that you could spend really deepening into that is that it question, and also being present moment with your kids, present moment with yourself, finding the joy in today. The part of how I am made is to help women like really just like open into that authentic, I call it their peculiar brilliance, because we
Mm.
all have those pieces that we like to fix, manage, or hide, but that's part of how we were made very peculiarly. And so just really embracing that and seeing that and having that rootedness in that. And then being empowered enough to advocate, like, I'm going to find my joy today. And you can find joy every day. And that's part of the beauty. Gay Hendricks in The Big League talks about the zone of genius. Like when we're in this happy, buzzy zone of genius, it's just like time flies by and we're having so much fun and life is beautiful. And we're also contributing the way that we're meant to. And in that zone of genius is joy.
Mm.
So it's they go this hand in hand. The way that we're meant to pour and help others and then receive that positive feedback from the universe, like, here's your joy buzz for the day. Let's do that.
That's so fantastic. And I absolutely love having like mind blown moments, which happened immediately when you were diving into this topic, in that I hadn't realized how much external validation we get from these time robbers. It hadn't
Mm,
even occurred to me. And I was expecting through our conversation to hear about like, oh, social media is a time robber, or oh, scrolling, or like more things that we do, not ways that we move through
are.
life, right? And
Mm,
that was really refreshing to understand. Oh, it's not necessarily the day-to-day like
mhm.
tasks that we go through in motions, but it is
Right.
it's the mindsets, right? It's the overarching themes of being people pleaser or being a hustler or being
Yes.
whatever. And
Yes.
knowing now that the reason that it's so hard to get past those is because of all of the validation we get externally. And then the way that you wove it in at the end of that little segment, saying how, you know, to move towards joy, what we need to actually do is go inward and like, instead of the external stuff, find a way to get it from within and ask ourselves the questions about what makes us happy and start to, it all wove together so beautifully. Thank you for that.
Ah, oh, you're welcome. I was just thinking, um, so when I was in my mom mode, my perfectionistic doormat mommy mode, I I always had my toenails painted because that was if you asked me what my top quality was, I would say my toenails because they were perfect and they were always glossy. And if they chipped, like I fix them. And And that was it. So if you kind of started to ask me other than that, and I could say like maybe I was helpful, but then that was it. And as I've been when I work with women, we work on their values. Like I think we're all taught, like going back to the time robbers, we're all taught we all have these two, we're born with two compasses. One is a compass that that's focused on everyone else's values for us, like what they want for us. And when the values they're instilling in us, like our parents and our faith communities and our schools, right? So like we have all these values that are kind of like pointing the way for us. And then as we get older, we start to get this thing called guilt. And that's when our compass is kind of like waking up and saying, like, it's different. Your compass is different. And so when we think about going in that different way, we feel guilty because
Mm.
it's not everyone, because it's not everyone else's values, because it's our own. Right. So being able to not only like embrace our peculiar brilliance, but just really follow our own compass. And I believe that following joy will aligns with your values. And so I'm saying this because so here's the full circle thing. So now when I look at myself in the mirror, so I am a woman who works on, one of my values is being strong in all the ways. I work on my spiritual health. I work on my physical health, my mental and my emotional health and my financial health. And like, so when I look back and I see this woman who is strong, this is probably the first time in my life I could be like, oh my God, I am beautiful in places other than my toes. It's because I'm aligned. My values are aligned. So therefore, my authentic beauty is coming out and it radiates. So I have this authenticity. Like I embrace my peculiar wackiness. Like I need to meditate under a blankie every day, and I wear crazy socks all the time. And so right. So but I'm not afraid of sharing those, because that's just part of my authentic strength and my authentic peculiar brilliance. And really just embracing, it helps us embrace ourselves more fully when we love ourselves and live into our values. And so I'm no longer a woman that just says, okay, I have to wear sandals year round because my toes are my best asset.
Hmm.
I can say, I can lead with myself and saying like, I love and I bring all my pieces into the light. And even though they're weird, sometimes it's like, it's who I am. So
What
yeah.
a an ideal to aspire to, right? For us to be
Mm.
able to just show up and lead with our wacky, who we
Yeah,
are.
like bring it into the, I think there's all this duality in life. I was talking to someone about like how success and failure, you can't have one without the other. And I believe the same thing about grief and joy.
Mm.
We have to be able to feel into that that loss and the potential loss to be able to really embrace that. But yeah, so also that shadow piece, that piece that we're afraid of, is maybe a piece we just haven't seen. We haven't brought it into the light yet. It's because it's so much closer to who we are. It's
Yeah.
so much more us. And a lot of us are afraid of sharing ourselves, right? Sharing that really special part. We don't want other people to get hurt, but we might be also like ashamed or embarrassed about it.
And some of us might not even know what that is in ourselves.
Mhm.
We may not have even gone into the shadows and wondered, dared to wonder, dared to get
Mhm.
curious about our own selves because we've been going through life completely guided by somebody else's compass, right?
Yes.
Do you
Yes.
find that the women who come and work with you and the folks that you work with in communities are at the stage where they're self-aware and looking for ways to be the banks to their own river and create the life they want? Or are they more at this stage where they're like, something isn't quite right and I want to figure out what? Or is it like the spectrum?
That's such a great question. So I know from EQ about 90% of people believe they are self-aware and only 15% are.
Wow.
Right. So I know. So that's crazy. Um, and what I would say is that a lot of people, we're just focused on doing our things. and trying to get things right, trying to get things done. And so I mostly meet people when they're at an extreme frustration point, when they're just like, this doesn't work. Joy sounds better. I got some weirdness inside of me, so that's why I say your authentic, peculiar brilliance, so that they know that, it's a pathway to acceptance. It's a pathway to like opening up to maybe some pieces of them that they hadn't thought of before. And so I would just say, the self-awareness spectrum is right, so it's like the whole spectrum, and the frustration point is real. So this frustration and like this exhaustion, like if you're just crazy busy, exhausted, or frustrated, like that's the point when we're like, all right, we want another way to slice this pie. Let's figure it out. Let's try the joy
Right.
this time.
This reminds me of like the client path that my clients face. I'm always like, have you reached the
Ooh.
part yet where like you're sleeping in separate beds from your husband? Like, have you reached the point yet where your kids don't want to talk to you about their day because they're scared you're going to blow up because you're so stressed all the time? Like, have you reached the point yet where and all of these points along the way, which differ for everyone, but like as these coaches and experts in our craft, we sort of see things happening from the outside perspective. And that's why I think we're in such a good position to be able to help these women, because we're like, oh, I see
Mhm.
where you're at on the path. Oh, and I know what's next. So let's help guide you, right? Let's address you where
Yeah.
you're at. And I love
Yeah.
that you were talking earlier about encouraging women to do some of this work and to prioritize their own joy before the crisis point. We don't have to wait till that crisis point. Like we can start
Yeah.
now, right?
Yes, yes, and joy, right, increases our bandwidth, right? It increases that buffer for when stuff does go down, when things are really difficult, right? We have this base. We have a base. We have a soft bed to land on versus like, okay, we're hitting concrete again. Here we go. Brace yourself.
Yeah. All been there,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes. So we don't, it's almost like preventative care, right? So we get to a point, we help people at the crisis point move away and like, right, and see their lives. I help women see their different part of how I'm built is I'm a strategic, like empathetic soul. And so, right, I can see a path through that's much more efficient, and I can embrace and hold space. But also I witnessing that we are brilliant souls in our own way, and being able to reflect that to others, right? Just having, I'm not saying everybody, everyone could probably use a coach, but like finding people who can reflect
Hmm.
to you, not people. I've been talking to a lot of people lately about our energetic bandwidth. So we tend to like all hang out with people around the same energetic bandwidth of each other, but finding those people who are a little like, they get you more excited. They let you see like who you could be. Those are the people who are going to help you figure out like, is this it? What is next for me? How can I show up more as myself? Find those people at that I guess they're up vibing, right? So they're up vibe from you. So find those people and hang with them, right? And then you start to really gain momentum. That could be a set of like besties, that could be a coach, that could be a therapist, so
Yeah.
yeah, just really embracing um that there is more for you, and that what you're doing is so important, and there is more.
I love that. Thank
Mm.
you for all of the wisdom that you have shared with us today. I feel like
Oh.
this episode is an up vibe that is available for people. Like, you just need to tune into podcasts like this, to people like Heidi who have this understanding and like they have a different perspective and are able to share it and open something up, unlock something in your brain, hopefully, as you're listening to this. But Heidi, before we wrap, is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with today? A piece of advice or just something that you want to make sure everyone hears?
Mm. For everyone who is listening to this, I would like to let you know that you are worthy of joy.
Mhm. Yes, you are. Thank you. That's
Oh,
fantastic. Thank you for
you're
being
welcome.
here. Thank you for sharing with us. And if anyone's listening, find Heidi on Facebook, find me, let us know what your takeaway was. Let us know
Yeah.
if you had any aha moments and share with us, because I think that that's, for me at least, the most fulfilling piece of bringing in experts and having these conversations is I always learn something, and I'm so curious to know what resonates with the listeners. So please let us know. We'll have all of the information for Heidi in the show notes, her website, her Facebook. Um, and is there anywhere else that we should be directing people your way if they're curious how to get into your world?
Yeah, that is good for now.
Yeah,
I'll go with
awesome.
it.
Awesome. Well, that's it, guys, for this week. Until next week, keep on growing like a mother.